Well, hello there, this is Shane from Shane's Books and Review, and I hope you are having a great day today. What are we going to be talking about? It's Retribution from Dean M. Cole, which is, technically speaking, the second book, but it's also the third book, because there was a prequel that was released after this one was released. The first one was called Sector 64, First Contact. That's the actual title. The second one was Ambush, which was actually the first one, and then we have this one, which is Retribution, which is the second one, but it's actually the third one. Yeah. We'll just go with that. And the narrations was done by R.C. Bray in this one as well. Before we start, I think this is going to be the last D.M. Cole book we're going to cover for a while. I mean, don't get me wrong, good stuff, and I enjoy it. But it's because I enjoy it, it's why I want to wait before I read any more of it, because I don't want it to become tedium. I did that with Jack Reacher whenever I first discovered the joys of that character. But there was a lot of pulp that was in the middle. The first ones were really good, and there was this big stretch where I was like, But I'm not saying that's what's going to happen with these books. I just want to make sure that I continue to enjoy them. So I'm going to pace it out a little bit. It's been a phenomenal thing listening to this guy through this series so far. And then also, if I remember correctly, he was the one that did the narrations with the other series that D.M. Cole had, the Singularity and all that. So it's been kind of fun to see how he's handled these different characters. It's not tedious. It's kind of not the same characters. The delivery is not the same, even though, if I remember correctly, it's the same person. So what do we have in this book? What makes this something that would be worth reading? Because, as previously mentioned, I kind of felt like there were some things that was borrowed in some fashions from his previous series. And there's got to be something that's keeping me going besides just wanting to be a completionist. You know, one would think, right? The story continues. Give me an opportunity here, okay, before you click off. I'm not going to bash it, but probably not going to praise it either. There was good points. There was bad points. And it wasn't weak writing. It was good writing. And in fact, it's kind of like he's took this whole sci-fi space military drama thing to a different level. There's a thing for me, and if you've been watching for a while, you'll know this. You'll know that I like character development. I like getting to know the characters. Sometimes there can be way too much on the front end to get to that point. I like to learn through experience. I think it should have been a little bit longer so that the pacing wasn't so breakneck through the book. However, as a person that lives with ADHD, I can completely respect that on the same level. So it's kind of bad, kind of good. There wasn't like any of the non-linear storytelling, jumping back and forth, all that kind of stuff. But it has to do with the way that he's handling the alien creatures versus our cousins in space versus us. The different mentalities and the different technologies, and he's done what a lot of authors would do, which is taking from this, adding this piece, making it his own. And that has made for a really, really decent story in this. We start out with a scene that's reminding us of how things have changed for humanity. We have a individual that is on one of these turtles, which they call the ships that were given to us, and he's landing on a base, and he's got a fallen comrade with him, and it's where people haven't seen some of this stuff. They don't realize that this is a possibility. They know it's a possibility, but they haven't seen it themselves yet, so it hasn't quite really sank in that, yes, we have alien spaceships. Yes, we've been reverse engineering them. Yes, we have our own versions, so on and so forth. So with that being said, that first opening scene is just there to kind of repaint the scene, repaint an opening, which was a good thing because in the prequel and in the second book, the openings were kind of the same, but this one wasn't. It was after the aftermath. There's a lot of solemnness to it. You can tell the characters are sad, and this should be a kudos to R.C. Bray at this point. He was able to show the emotional feeling for the different characters as the story progresses without it being obvious. And by obvious, imagine the cheesy announcer that is just going to go on and on. It wasn't anything like that. It was more of a subtle type of a thing. It was more visceral, really. It was one of those unique ways, unique voice control is what it amounts to. So for that, he has immediately, after me listening to this series and the one before, has raised himself to my top 5 whenever it comes to favorite narration people. So we have that opening scene, and as we move away from that, we start to see those technological advantages that we just haven't had in the past, being mostly little nanobots, nanomachines that comprise different components and are integrated into us. Well, let's fast forward a little bit. So in the first book, when we left off of it, our genetic cousins that we had come from, they were fairly arrogant, yes, and one of our guys had really fervently tried to get a hold of their commander and say, hey, look, they just blew our crap up, they wiped out cities, they have a weapon that does this. But the people that were in charge were so just damn arrogant that they wouldn't listen to him until the last second, and at that point it was too late. So the entire fleet was left open. There was none left, and there was only one of the Xarxes. One of their ships was the only one that was left functioning, and they raided it and killed that commander. Accidentally had ran into actually the device that was doing all the damage. It is explained a little bit more in detail where this weapon came from in the second book, which was cool. It was good to see the way that it was done because it was realistic. Now it's kind of a sad story, the way that it was changed, but it started out as a way to get rid of cancer. It would find the genetic variant and then remove it and put it into another dimension altogether. See, this is why I was seeing in the first one that there was a lot of those sorts of borrowing, because in Solitude, and I don't know if it was that Solitude borrowed from this, or if you would you put which one came first for us so we know? So in this one, they get into these ships of our cousins that are so far ahead, and we come across more technological type things. There's implants that will allow them to speak with the ship and integrate into the systems of the ship whenever it comes to controlling things or asking the computer to do stuff. So it really makes me think of, well, Elon Musk and his whole thing with the brain, where in the past, for helping people that suffer from chronic pain or particular types of mental instabilities or abnormal behaviors, they'll put these two huge probes in the brain, kind of point them at a particular point, and then that will fire small charges to help disrupt those patterns. But Elon's got a very unique idea, and I hope to see that come to fruition. That's something I would actually kind of like to talk about with you guys and gals. So with that being said, they find this, they get this technology, and we go on our adventure. It's kind of cool to see how things play out, because there was a ship company that was being sent from our possible good guy forefathers. There's a rescue fleet coming from them, and we find out just a little bit more of what was going on, the reasons why things had happened. And there's a couple of things that are going to have to be resolved, like ships are getting ready to fall into the Atlantic, the rest of the fleet that was coming in from the bad guys, and all these things had to be dealt with. But here was the thing that was the most interesting part of this. For me, it was almost like an anime story, being that the actual journey and the things that were happening inside of the story were far more interesting than what the end point was going to be. Because it was obvious there was going to be a showdown, that these people were probably going to show up or may not show up, and then there was going to be the end scene, and, you know, would it be successful? And we find out more about the bad guys and the reasoning and the logic, and that we're probably going to be good after this is taken care of. So it was interesting to see the way the story did come to conclusion. I'm not going to say that it did wrap up. I'm just going to say that the end fight scenes, the end interactions were really good. Whenever it comes to military books and military authors and people that had served, and by the way, Dean Umco, thank you for your service that you were in, because it certainly has given you insights and the foreknowledge of how things work to make things more realistic for people like me that are laymen that really have no clue. The story overall was really good, especially in the middle. We find out more about Sandra, because in the first one, she was saying, hey, you know, you're not going to put a kid in me unless I say you are, and I'm not going to live with you and all this. And in this book, there's like a total flip-flop. Now, if you'll remember, in the previous book, she had kind of found out that she was pregnant. She knew about it, and in this one, it becomes more of a thing for her. And I can understand from a parent, from my aspect of it, of yes, she's in the military, yes, she's a fighter pilot type of a person, yes, she is in danger, you know, doing these sorts of things and all that kind of stuff, right? I get that. So whenever I say what I'm getting ready to say, don't downplay it. I'm not short-sighting her. The main point that I was getting at is throughout the beginning of the book, she's got her hand on her stomach a lot, and her mom is like, hey, you need to tell your man and all this kind of thing. And that becomes a really big thing through that story for her. And there are other people that have figured it out as well. The way that things get tied at the end to all that was kind of a nice moment. It brought me back around. It brought the story back around. And it was a good endpoint, because sometimes a series, it'll be ambiguously left open. There's that aspect of humanity that Dina McCullough is putting into this story that sometimes, this is the whole point, we're finally getting there, sorry, but the ADD train, the ADHD train is so strong and prevalent today. Those military authors that I've read in the past, they'll leave a lot of that kind of a thing out. There will be all kinds of trysts and frollops and people copulating and just whatever, right? And yeah, I get that. That's going to happen in high-stress situations. It's a good way for the human mind and body to, A, feel connected, and B, relieve stress. I get that. But in this one, there's more of that human touch. So it's very much appreciated. I mean, he's not really that good at writing the romantic scenes. We'll give him that. It's kind of one of those things. But the rest of the story, the sci-fi, the way that he looks at the technology, having those human connections and the interplay between the characters, people that seem rough and tough and grumbled and grizzled might not actually be that way. They might have reasons of life experience that have caused them a lot of pain, and they're just doing the best that they can in order to deal with these things that are around them. And then we find out, no, this character's more deep than what we thought. It's not just that this has happened, it's all of this. And they actually care, and that's why they're being the way they are. I think that if you were to read the first one, which is Ambush, and then this one, then you'll see that. You'll see those characters develop in a big way. It's a thing that really, it aggravates me sometimes, because technically speaking, a story can be just 3 points of, I wanted to open the door, but it was locked. But I found my key, and then I got out. I mean, that's technically speaking a story, but you know, having so much more depth to it of the reason why I couldn't find my key was that perhaps my 6-year-old thought it would be funny to take that key and put it in his backpack and go to school and close the door behind him and then lock the door, or some kind of silliness. You know, there's all those little things that you can do to develop that story and to embellish that story. But with Dina McCullough on this series, this is one of the good points. It's been unique to see that development between those characters and how everybody has reacted to each other as the time has progressed. He's not afraid to kill off characters that need in their situations to actually die, which I also respect. Instead of making it where everybody's always alive like a Disney Princess Fairy movie, and if somebody falls 500 feet they don't die. I mean, there's that realisticness. There was a particular scene on one of the moons of Jupiter where I was starting to wonder if person A and person B were going to get ate by something worse than you could imagine as a megalodon. There was story notes that arced across both books, which usually doesn't happen these days. So that was a nice touch. That was well done. The entire story arc was, if not thought out well in advance and planned, and this was just off the cuff, holy crap, this man's going to be formidable whenever it comes to sci-fi. Watch. You'll be amazed, I'm sure. So, is it worth your time, effort, and energy? Is it worth your money? Is it worth you going and reading about this? Let me make a little disclaimer here. If you like sci-fi, if you like space, if you like formidable aliens and formidable allies, overcoming obstacles in ways that are, kind of foreseeable. Let's be honest about that. That's where it's at. But the human connection to each other and survival. If you like those things, this will probably be something that you'll enjoy. What did I feel while I was listening? The overall feelings was, whenever we first started, I was kind of happy that the story didn't start out with a storm and fighter pilots being annihilated by said storm. But that's only because I read the prequel first, okay? So that's my bad. Then I would have had a completely different experience in that regard. So if you're going to pick them up and read them, I would say read them in the order they came out instead of doing what I did, because I'd never had that opportunity to read the prequel before the original. And I thought it would be fun, but I kind of messed myself up on that. But those feelings that pulled out of me was through the middle of the book, intrigue, wonderment, exploring. I felt like this would be kind of an environment that I would like to have an opportunity to go through myself and poke and prod and learn things about these ships. And it has to do with the way that he wrote the different places to reality in his books, to the universe that he's creating here. It has to do with the different architectural styles that the different races have that are in space. It was actually quite phenomenal. And then there's the technology aspect of how different this is versus this. But there's also base commonalities, because this one race, our cousins, our benefactors, as it were, are bringing all these other races into the fold. So as they do that, they're only benefiting themselves and the other races, because they can take the best technological advances and then everybody can have. Also, it's not socialism or communism either, because they do have a financial system of some sort, and that's really not expounded on, but it's one of those things that I would imagine, because of the way that things have been worded, that it would be a capitalistic type of a system. Not a whole lot of regret and a whole lot of hurry up, because like I said, the pacing was maybe a little bit fast in some places, but overall it was enjoyment. It was certainly a fun ride to be on. I certainly dug the characters. I really enjoyed R.C. Bray in the way that he narrated this whole thing. And on top of it, the subject matter and the story and the storylines, they were slightly unique, and sometimes in our genre that we like to read, some things can be so very stale, but it was good to see a fresh light, a fresh breath of air into it. And I'm thinking that's probably one of the reasons why he's done so well on bestseller list whenever it comes to this particular series. Anyhow, with that being said, question of the week. Oh my goodness gracious. So what are your thoughts about this? Have you read this before? And if you have, what do you think of him versus other authors in the same kind of a genre? So if we're talking about nanobot spaceships and alien races and us exploring and getting into fights, that immediately puts a couple of authors into my mind, like B.B. Larson or Emily Davenport. Also, if you have any comments that you want to leave, please feel free. You know what to do down there, and we'll check those out. I'm excited to say that with some of the restrictions being lifted, that we're bringing people back into the office, which is great. So beyond that, thank you so much for watching. If you have watched this far, my goodness, thank you. I really do appreciate it. I know Scraps does too. And with that, you know what to do. Like, share, subscribe. I'm Shane with Shane's Reviews, and I don't know which one of these you'll watch, but there should be this end screen thing that's come in, and maybe we put stuff up there. If we did, which one will you pick? It's completely up to you. But if you choose one, I will see you in the next video.